All right, gang. If you know me, if you've watched our show, which if you're watching this, you probably do, and you have, you know I love a good horror movie about things coming back from the dead, so to speak. And this new movie that we are going to talk about, which is now available, called Nameless Days, takes that premise and really adds the isolation and desperation factor to it. But according to the Mayan calendar, there is a select number of days that the evil spirits can return to Earth, and they do in this film, and it's done pretty damn well, in my opinion. And today, to talk about it, Nameless Days, we have composer with us, Christain Davis. Christian, how you doing, man?
Pretty good, thanks. Happy to be here.
Um, this movie, right before we started recording, I actually had mentioned uh, one of the directors, Andrew Mitchum, and his partner Matthew Whedon. Andrew came on, uh, 6-7 months ago, maybe a little bit longer, to talk about his film Behind You, which was creepy. You composed that. Now you guys go on to this next feature, Nameless Days. Um, Totally different feeling horror film, where Behind You was, centered inside that house and stuff, and this one, the demon our monster spirit combination of the three is terrorizing and harvesting on the people trying to cross the border from Mexico into Texas. Uh, the trailer, which did you compose the music for the trailer too?
I didn't.
I was,
That's usually a different job. Someone else usually does the trailer.
I was just going to say, it sounds completely different from the actual movie. Uh, but it does kind of highlight for you, if you check out the trailer on YouTube or anywhere, the basic premise that this beast, this monster, comes back for a certain amount of time, and it happens to come back out of this cave-esque dwelling that is on that border, and all these people are crossing the border, and they are choosing this layer of sorts as kind of a route, and it does not go so well for them. And then we get to meet our main antagonist and our I should say our main protagonist. We meet our main antagonist, but our main uh, protagonist, Nicole Ali. I'm gonna butcher her last name. Um,
I guess is good as mine. Yeah.
Leondes and Charles Halford as Charlie, who plays her dad. And really, this becomes a movie of survival and stuff, as they're trying to basically outlast the allotted amount of time that this monster is killing people. But I liked it because the tonality that you chose as the composer, it progressively made me feel more and more uneasy. Like you weren't really reliant on like those sharp, like stinger rooms or any of that to really get the scare. You were really, I guess the score of this movie felt very atmospheric and complimentary to what was happening. So congratulations, man.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. I know it would definitely. First, the first talks with Andrew and Matt was, we always talk about, well, what do you want the score to be, right? Like talk to me about their vision, right? And they said they said I want it to be sparse, totally different than Behind You, right? Behind You, as you mentioned, was like kind of like a haunted house type of thing, right? There was the spirit in the house, and it was very traditional. The film and the score was very orchestral, lots of like dissonance and jump scares. And then this one is like, no, this one is exact opposite. This one's got to be sparse and desolate and minimal. Like, we don't want it to feel traditional in any way, right? And so just kind of the way they shot it too. They shot it with these big, you know you feel like you're in the middle of nowhere, right? These big desert landscapes and just nothing around. And I try to do my best to kind of create some sort of just uneasy atmosphere throughout the whole thing.
You do a good job. You
Thank you.
uh, the the film in itself, centered around um, this ancient calendar, and then he is out in that remote property, presumably Texas, Mexico border and stuff. Like, with all of this being Andrew and Matthew's second one, big feature, horror feature, full length film together, and then with you being part of that too, was that something like? Do you know? Because we'll get into you uh, here in a second, because you've done a bunch of cool different stuff that is far from horror, like Transformers, cartoons, and stuff like that, which is cool. But from a horror fan, when I was in film school and the shorts and stuff that I've made, I've always wanted to kind of do one of each some subgenre of horror too. And now, having had them and now you on the show, and it is a completely different subgenre of horror. Um, Working on both of them with them, is that something that you think that they are trying to do, or are they just kind of like doing it as it pops into their mind? Or you don't get to see that too often, I guess is my point, is where such a drastic change but within the same umbrella of horror.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I don't know what what was going through Andrew and Matt's minds when they made them. But I think generally I can speak for myself as a composer, as a creative person, and you understand this too as a filmmaker, fellow filmmaker. You want to always try to challenge yourself and break out of whatever box you might be in. So I think they, you know, and it was fun for me too to say, okay, then on the last one we did it this way. Let's do a totally different kind of horror film this time, right? Just like like no one wants to get pigeonholed in one little niche. And so I think that I don't know where the inspiration for the story came from, but it's a really cool story. That's an Andrew and Matt question, but man, it was definitely, you couldn't put these movies back next to each other and imagine it's the same directors, right? Behind You and Nameless Days are just so different. The story, the pacing, the cinematography, the whole thing, the whole concept is just totally different. They definitely pulled it off.
So for you, in going and looking at their dailies, or looking at their hard edits and everything, and you're starting to compose this music, what for you is your process like? Do you like seeing footage as a shot? Do you like seeing rough cuts? Like, how do you go about it?
Every movie's a little bit different, but generally I like to, if I can, if the schedule permits, to get involved with like a rough cut. There's not too much sense in getting involved with dailies, or getting involved in the script stage. I might read a script, but like it's hard for me. It's such a visceral reaction to seeing, the what they've shot. Right. Once I see a scene with the actors and their emotions, and I just react to it. Right. I have an idea when it comes to music coming off of a page, or even dailies so much, you're just not gonna be able to really, react to that to the full extent. So I usually hold off until there's at least a rough cut, um, if not a locked cut. On this one, actually, it was such a fast turnaround. It was a locked cut, so I didn't, they didn't. There was no editorial changes after they gave it to me, um, and the first thing is, I'll spend a couple of days with it, sitting with the movie, watching it a few times. Coming up with ideas, and then we'll have we call it a spotting session. I'll get Andrew and Matt in, get the directors in. And it takes half a day at least, of just going through the movie, stopping and starting, and talking about, oh, what do you think we should do here? Do you want this to be scary, or do you want music here at all? Do you just want silence and sound design, do all the heavy lifting? And we just go through, scene by scene by scene. And a 2-hour movie takes you 5 hours of meeting time, right? It's just a long exhaustive process. And so that's the first step. And then after that, I go away to my studio, and I usually try to tackle kind of the most challenging, most important scenes first, 'cause I know that that's the one that's gonna matter the most. It's gonna they're gonna have the most opinions about, and it's also going to, once you yeah, I'm always trying to crack the score, trying to, it's like solving a puzzle. And once I've made the directors happy with that, with a couple of those really important scenes, I feel like, and that takes multiple revisions. Then I'm like, cool, now I know what they want. Now I know how to do the rest of the movie. So you can break it down into smaller scenes. So that's kind of my process for starting. And on this one, um, basically how it went. Started with a lot cut, went and scored the big scenes towards the end of the movie first, and then use that to kind of trickle down to the other stuff.
It's interesting that you hearing you do that, just because the majority of composers that we have had like to do it narratively. So it's interesting that you like to jump around a lot. Sounds like, which is kind of cool. So is it like, do you tackle the scene as far as what you know is going to be the most um, heavy inducive as far as workload? Thus, it, like you just said, the bigger scenes, and then do you draw from those scenes to kind of fill in the gaps, or are there certain projects that it's completely different from A to, call that A to E? Like, have you ever worked on a project where the tonality may be pretty consistent, but there is some pretty steady like drop offs or like whoa type of stuff? And how is that as a composer? Do you prefer to work on a project that does something like that, or do you kind of like it to be all in the same vein, pretty much?
No, I mean, there's definitely there's certain films where the tone's going to be pretty consistent throughout. Um, and there's always going to be more than one theme. I mean, it's not. It would just be a really boring score if you just had one theme. But like on the Nameless Days, for example, I've got the first thing is I wrote that I call it this. We called it the serpent theme, right? Because Andrew Matt just kept referring to, like, there's this Aztec demon that's come back to steal the babies, right? And they're
Mhm.
like, we, and you can kind of mention this in your intro, that there's not a lot of like real jumpy stuff, right? It's kind of, it's like a slow burn. This creature moves really slowly, and they call it like a serpent chasing a mouse, just kind of slithering through the grass, right? And so the serpent theme is this kind of big, like these big kind of like bendy chords, and I wrote that first, right, at the end of the movie, like the kind of the biggest climactic scene. But then there's also spots in the movie that need, I wrote like what I call like a happy theme and a sad theme, right? Because
Mhm.
there's a couple of moments in the movie where like we actually want to, or we want to feel relief, we want to feel a bit of sentimentality, and then but there's also times when we're gonna want to feel sadness too. So those are it's basically that though. So I wrote three scenes to kind of write. I picked a sad scene, a happy scene, and then the serpent, the scary scene, right? To kind of get my main three themes down. And then and yeah, it's interesting. Um I don't know if I'm answering your question well,
No,
but
you are. You are.
the when I first started doing this, I guess like 15 years ago, it first started my first films. I did kind of work in a narrative way, and I've heard of big A-list composers doing it both ways, right? Like I've heard of obviously Michael Giacchino, like I could once interviewed about, for like, he was doing the TV show Lost. He would just say, give me the episode, and he would write, he'd start watching it. Whenever he felt like there needed to be music, he'd just stop and he'd compose that music, and not know how the episode ended, right? Um and that's a very narrative way, chronological way of scoring an episode or scoring a film, um uh which I think can work really well. And then I've also, you listen to an interview with like John Williams, and like the ET score, for example, right?
Mhm.
Like the very end of the movie is when all the themes come together. He's been hinting at these musical motifs throughout the entire movie, and then finally when they take flight, it's like boom, there it is, right? So like he
Yeah.
kind of worked from the back. You start at the end in mind, and then worked forwards, right? Um, so so and I so I have found, I've tried it both ways. for me, I generally like the John Williams way, to start with the end, or start with the kind of biggest, the meatiest scenes first, because they're going to give you the most to compose with, and you're gonna have the most to say in those scenes, and then I find it a lot easier to kind of score the smaller scenes, that because they'll be informed by what you've all the work you've done on the bigger scenes, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And my next thing I was going to ask you is, one of the parts of your score that kind of stood out were there were certain scenes with her and her dad. With her dad is definitely like a tragic hero type figure. Like his wife left him. Their single dad living on this ranch. Doesn't get along with his brother. Doing his best to be a good dad to his daughter, but the night that he's kind of drinking too much when he finds out that his daughter's got plans to move to California, and there's like this really subtle music in the beginning, like when her and her dad are having these exchanges, that you as a cat, like if you're a casual movie fan, because once you go to film school, you never watch it the same way again.
Right.
It's like one of those, like some of those, the music, like casual movie fan, you may not even notice it, but as someone who's had to use like temp music and royalty free stuff for assignments, and having teachers say like put music in, even if they're just doing something, like there needs to be something there, and there absolutely always does, like because you'll if there's nothing there, you're automatically going to notice it, but if it's the right amount and it's like the right, I guess, pitch to the score, like it's almost there, and you don't even notice it until you're like really like processing everything your mind is taking in. Stuff like that compared to your serpent theme where it's like shit's hitting the fan. Like
Yeah.
where like what do you like composing? um and if it's the same, it's the same, but I was going to say, what do you get like more of a kick out of doing? Is it like that subtle stuff that that not everyone may not even notice just because they're so enthralled in the scene? Or do you like that, like, no, here comes this freaking demon and she's coming to harvest you, and here's the theme that accompanies that?
Yeah. I mean, I definitely, um, man, like the ironic thing. Here's the first thing I'll say is that, like, ironically, sometimes the smallest stuff is
Yeah,
just as hard as the huge bombastic stuff, right?
yeah.
Because like practicing that restraint, and I'm pretty confident. I'm trying to remember correctly with that kind of that cue between her and her dad. It's like, actually, it's track three. I think it's track three on the album on this coming out tomorrow, called "Drunk and Sober." Is the name of the track. Anyway, so man, I scored that one the first time way bigger, right? A lot more emotion going on, like probably like I don't know, some strings and pianos. I had a bunch of stuff, and Andrew and Matt were like, no, no, strip it down, right? And so you have to kind of like go into what, which is like just a couple of things playing instead of a dozen things. Um, and so I'll spend almost as much time thinking about that, and working on those small cues, and they're challenging. I would say, if I had to pick, though, I'd probably pick the big, awesome, throw the kitchen sink at it cues, when you're just like, there's, all restraints are off, and you can just, go nuts, with the big action stuff, the big, chase stuff, with the big kind of gnarly, that serpent theme, right? That's really fun. I mean, that's more fun than the smaller emotional stuff, but they're both equally challenging in different ways.
It's always interesting because from having the camera in your hand or directing or whatever, you always get told the same kind of thing, like it's too much, or like you don't that's not necessary type of a thing. And it's interesting to hear you as a composer say that kind of stuff, because I think in any art, film production, um, audio recording, musical artists, the whole nine, sculpting, like pick your thing. I think artists, like what's in the head, like when the vision is in the head, like I think everybody who is a creative minded person works to get that vision out. And sometimes the vision in the head may not convey itself as well as like 70% of that vision is like an A plus to someone whose vision that is not, versus the creator of said vision are maybe looking at it like, damn, I only got like 70% of my what I wanted it to be, but at the same time, everybody else is like, no, this is exactly what we need.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's definitely right. I mean, there's and well, and as you know, on a film, it's such a collaborative process, right? Like my it's not the Christian Davis show, so
Yeah.
people aren't buying tickets to the Christian Davis show. So it's about serving the film, and the captain of that ship is our director, or directors in this case. And so yeah, so I mean, same thing with honestly with with the serpent theme as well. That one, the final thing you're hearing is probably like the fifth revision because like that again, I started off with too much going on, you know. I don't know if overcompensating or whatever, just and they're like, no, strip it down. And so like that cue is a marriage of melding of the minds, as you will, of Andrew and Matt and mine, to get to where it is and to create what I think turned out really cool, but like
Mm.
it was just if I didn't have them, giving me feedback and working with me, it would be a totally different score, and so sometimes like, you're right, 70% is enough, and my 100% had to then strip it down to 70% to get it to where they wanted it to be, and kind of meeting in the middle. I mean, maybe they would have had it be even more subtle and more sparse than what I had, but kind of that meeting in the middle, I think, was a nice place to land for sure.
Well, as the consumer, as the just casual movie horror fan, I would say, yeah, it was rad as hell.
Oh,
Uh,
good, awesome.
the
Yeah, you never know. You never know. I mean, because like as you know, as having made films, like you can never step back and just watch it, like and have it as
no,
a consumer,
yeah,
as an audience member, because you know where all the warts are and all the things you would have done differently and all whatever, and it's just so that's that. Thank you for that. It's good. It's great to hear that.
it's funny because my wife last November, so right after Halloween, I got like a short film in this festival, and it was the first time that it was like a bigger festival, and I like went dressed up, and we went to the theater, and we're watching the film the whole time, and you're 1,000% correct. Like the whole film, which we knew like the back of our hands anyway, the whole time my wife is holding my hand, smiling, and she's watching, and she keeps like looking at my reaction, and she said I was just dead the whole time. And she was like, "What are you like? What were you? You taking it in? Like, what were you doing?" I'm like looking at everything that needs to get changed, and like everything that hadn't had time to do the way that I wanted it to do. And I was like, besides that, I was listening to the people behind us to make sure they weren't saying this. How in the hell did this get in or anything like that? But yeah, to watch your own work or listen to your own work in that kind of a setting, yeah, I don't think it'll ever be this. Will never be the same um, once you've kind of walked through that veil and are putting your stuff out there like that.
Yeah, it's impossible. It's impossible to ever have that. So it's good. Yeah, it's always good. I love going to well, I love and hate. It's frightening to go watch a movie with a that you've worked on with an audience and see how they if it's a comedy, see if they're laughing. If it's a horror, seeing if they're gasping, if they're scared, the best, is people are usually pretty good about keeping thoughts to themselves inside the theater, but like you want to go out when they're all walking away from the movie or they're going to the bathroom afterwards. That's when they're gonna be like, man, that movie sucked, or that movie was awesome. Can you believe that scene was so cool? That's where you're gonna get the most honest response. In the parking lot of the bathroom after the movie, no one's listening, but it's fun being a little flat, just going in as a spy, right? Just popping into the theater and no one knows you're the composer or the director.
Yeah,
Actors, it's harder because obviously they see you on the screen, so you can't be sneaky. But when you're behind the scenes like us, you can definitely get in there and get some intel. Um,
for
and look,
sure.
Yeah.
The process with you revising, I'm curious as to like what that is like. So when you do like your first, take on the score for the film, are you like getting back with them? Are you guys like watching the movie with the first draft of the score and taking notes as you guys go? Or do you send it to them, they watch it, take their notes, send you notes? How does that all work out?
Yeah. So that, and this, it used to very much be in the room. And when I can do that, I love to do that. It's great to get a director, just in the room with me, and we can, that way we can just, I can he can say, I'm not really digging this sound right here, and I can just literally just fix it for him live right there in person, right? It's really
Mhm.
fast and efficient. But at the same time, that's why it used to always be that way. Obviously, in the beginning of my career, but nowadays, in the last 5 years especially, everyone's gotten so used to and comfortable with this Frame.io, Vimeo links, Dropbox, whatever. And so, and most people everyone seems busier now than they were, 10 years ago. And no one
Yeah.
has the time to come over to my studio, meet with me in person. So, especially over the last 5 years, it's just turned into almost a telecommuting remote job. And so I'm sending links to Andrew and Matt, and they'll give me some feedback, an email, or we'll hop on a phone call, and then I'll do another pass on it, and send them another video link for them to, and then if I'm really not, if it's really like, man, I'm not getting this, they're not getting the score for me that they want, then I'll say, come to the studio and let's work on it together, because obviously this kind of disconnect is, sometimes it can work great, other times you just you can't really truly collaborate. So I say, come to the studio, and let's work it out. um the but I don't know. Does that answer what was the what was the whole question?
No,
What
you kind of, yeah, you answered. You not only answered it, you almost gave the evolution of what it is like to work in film nowadays. Where, I mean, there's full length features that Disney put out over the pandemic, that all the voice actors are all doing it from their bedroom closets, and then they're meeting with the directors via Zoom, and they're all kind
Yeah.
of talking, and it's both, you know awesome to see that from being at like the low independent level, like, hey man, like, no more. And I was telling them on the thing we're working like right now, I'm like, hey, like, the guys that are at the highest level are still dealing with the aftermath of the last couple of years, as far as they're now taking some of the things that they have learned, as far as the what was looked at by people that I graduated with like the unfortunate circumstance, and they're using it to better their just overall production and some of it into practice. And I think that if you're able to do that remotely and get it, then all the more power to you. But I do agree with you. There's something to be said that when you're looking at footage in a room together, I think that the feeding of the energy of the room is definitely something that benefits film too. When you're in those late night sessions around a table, and this works, this doesn't, why, and you're having those kind of conversations that kind of can get daunting if you're just looking at a computer screen.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's just true of all communication, right? There's only so much information you can get from a text message, right? And
Yeah.
so much information you can get that much more from a phone call, or a Zoom. And then the highest level of human communication is you're in the person. You can actually like sense their body language, like, because the director might not want to tell the composer that he hates the cue. He's like, it's totally wrong. So he's gonna use words of like, well, it's just not totally there. I like it, but and then they're kind of beating around the bush. And then I can say, you know what? I think this cue, I can react to that and say this cue is totally wrong. I think I should do a whole rewrite from the ground up, right? Because I can tell that they don't want to tell me that, but from their body language, right? You can't get that
Yeah,
over an email or even a
for
phone
sure.
call,
For sure.
but and then I remember the other part of the question, you're kind of talking about like washing the whole thing down too. so I mean, after I tackle these important scenes, and again, the important scenes, the big kind of three that for this movie it was three, themes, motifs that I wrote. After I went through 5, 6, 7 revisions on those, and those were locked down, then I say, then that, I usually tell my directors, I'm like, okay, cool. Now let me just go write the rest of the score. Like we've done all of our experimentation or R&D on these on 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 really important scenes. Now let me just write the whole film so we can we've done this micro thing. Now let's go macro, and then we can sit, and then I'll send that to them, and we can actually just we can see how the whole movie feels. And we're gonna have a lot of feedback on, oh, this cue is too long, this cue is too short. I don't like where it starts, I don't like where it stops. Kind of the stuff we talk about when we're spotting the movie, in the beginning. But until you actually have my music in there that I've composed for this movie, you can't react to it in a certain way. And I mean, just kind of like, I mean, in that scenario, I actually feel there's some benefits to having a director watch it just on their own time. I
Mhm.
think there's also a certain pressure when you're in the room with the composer, like whereas like they can watch it, they can just be in their pajamas and watching the movie, like the bowl of popcorn, just chilling, and
Mhm.
they can have time, they can think about it for a couple of days before they get back to me. Whereas if I say, come to my studio, we're gonna watch the whole movie together, then it's just like they have to be on point and coming up with ideas, and I'm kind of almost applying a bit of a deadline or pressure to them. So in that scenario, I think it's kind of great that they can just send them a link and they can watch it, when they're happiest and they're most comfortable, and, and they're not like tired or stressed or whatever, and they didn't have to drive all the way over to my studio. Um, so there's pros and cons to this new way of working. I think there's a lot of pros, but definitely that it's still like if something's not gelling, something's not working, then you got to get in the room together, as best you can,
For sure.
or on a Zoom together, or whatever you can. I mean, something more than text and emails.
So with this, the Nameless Days being out and behind you before it, I gotta ask, what is it like as a composer to do something like this? But then you also get to mess around with figures from my childhood, that like shows like Transformers and stuff that is like a polar, complete opposite of the tone of the Nameless Days. Like that's got to be fun to be able to say you got to work on.
Yeah, no, that was a really cool one. That was a fun project. That one is so I was doing what we call additional music on the Transformers cartoon,
Hmm.
which means that the composer, the main composer, his name's Kevin Kiner, a good family friend, good friend of mine since as a kid. He was the main composer, and with these TV schedules, everyone's got to hire help, right? You can't just do, one man can't, or a woman, human cannot deliver the music they need in 4 days, right? TV's brutal. TV's like, here's an episode, we need 40 minutes of music, and by the end of the week, right? And so what often happens on these TV shows, um, is that they call them additional music composers, like subcontracting, right? So like he's gonna come up with like the motifs and the palette, and he's gonna guide the show. He's gonna write a lot of as much of the show as he can, and then whatever he can't, he'll hire out to me, and there's a couple other guys in that show. And dude, it was awesome. I'm just saying, like it's such that, I always talk about playing in different sandboxes, right? I love what I love most about this job, why I pursued this job is in music, because I love music, but I didn't want to become like pigeonholed in like one thing. Like it's so cool that like one month I can be writing scary, horror music, and then the next month I can be writing cartoon Transformers epic battle music, and then the next month I could be writing like rom com music, like so like it's just like, so like it never gets boring, of course, it was cool. You could kind of harken back to some of those Transformer themes. But yeah, that was a blast. That was a great gig to work on. Loved working on that show.
Is there a certain genre? Is you just a fan, a movie fan, TV fan? What is your favorite thing to watch when you're not trying to compose for it? Just to sit with your bowl of popcorn and chill out.
um, it's I I don't have a favorite genre, but it depends on the day. Like I'm like, today's been a rough day. I need some comedy, like I need something light. Or
Yeah.
today's like, or sometimes ironically, today's been a stressful day, and I need something, to
Brutal.
grind on. Yeah, brutal. Like I like give me something, something serious and heavy. I don't know. It's weird how like I don't know what I want to watch, but like, um, but I mean, just like yeah, I mean, some nights it's drama, it's thriller. Some nights it's horror. Some nights it's comedy. It's just I love it all. It's hard to pick a favorite genre.
You're a well-rounded movie fan, just like your filmography.
Yeah, yeah, no, I mean that's the thing because like I've spent like as I said before, why I love this job and why I got into this because like I'm grinding on scary horror music for 6 weeks. The last thing I want to do after that is just do another horror movie. Like I almost never repeat genres back to back. It's like I did like the Nameless Days, and then what did I do after that? I did a Christmas movie. and
Huh.
then and then I did a kid adventure movie, kind of like a Chronicles of Narnia type thing, with like big orchestral fanfares. And then, next up for me, starting next week, is like I'm doing another like thriller. So it's just like it's just
Nice.
because you spend so much time, when you get so deep, you spend so many hundreds of hours on these movies in that one kind of film. It's just like I can't imagine just jumping right into another one. I don't know if I have any good ideas. Honestly, that's part of it too. Is like by jumping to a different genre, it's like cool. Now it's fresh again. It's fresh. It's like a reboot, musically and sonically for my brain. But but yeah, that's it's kind of I guess my viewing habits and my work habits both revolve around constant change.
What's your obviously the size of the film or show affects it immensely. You talked about the pace in which television works. Like 4 days later, we need the score of Transformers episode 2.7, what have you. That rapid, like fast paced work environment. Um, what is the time that it takes you to compose a movie, feature length?
Yeah. So movies. Generally 4 to 8 weeks. I like 6 weeks if I can get it. The more time the better, but about, anywhere from 1 month to 2 months.
I was just asking. I'm asking you that because I was having a debate with a buddy that I work with over. He was geeked out over hearing that Mandalorian season 3 just wrapped, thinking that it was going to come out in like June, and I just laughed at him. and
Yeah, no, there's so much post. There's editing, VFX, sound, music.
um, but
I
yeah,
would
like I would say your answer out of the composers I've gotten to talk to that like a month to 2 month, somewhere in there seems to be like the average. So that 6 week mark you said that seems to be the mean of the equation. Most
yeah.
people seem like they like that time
I've
period.
I've done some movies like in 2 weeks.
Wow.
And like and I mean, it's not something I aspire to. But basically like they came to me and they needed a score in 2 weeks, and then they're like, "We'll give you no notes. There's no you just do your thing. Like you just do your thing, whatever it is what it is." Because it was a TV movie. It was that Christmas movie I was just telling you about. That was last fall. I did that, and like it was just like, yeah, this thing airs in 3 weeks. We have 2 weeks to do a score. Just crank something out, and like you know, it's not you're not gonna do your best music, in
Yeah.
2 weeks. But the only way to get that done is for it to just not be a collaborative thing, not whatever. And I actually think it turned out pretty good, considering the time frame. I mean, now if you're doing a bigger movie, I mean, here's the difference between like TV, low budget films and TV and big budget films, right? At the beginning of my career as an assistant for Rupert Gregson Williams, and like we mostly worked on Adam Sandler comedies, but on those Adam Sandler comedies, they're $80 million movies. Like we would spend 3 months on like just the smallest little bit of comedy score because like they're trying so many things. Like when they have that much money on the line, or you're dealing with like a $200 million blockbuster,
Yeah.
They're gonna do 100 test screenings. They're gonna recut everything. Like they're just gonna pick it apart because they have to nail it because so much money's on the line. And they're gonna do, like the final mix of a movie will be at least 2 weeks, if not maybe 4 weeks. Like a movie like Dune or something, like one of those kinds of movies. I guarantee they spend at least like a month, just doing the final mix. Like Zimmer delivered his score and the sound guys delivered all their sound design. And they just spent weeks and weeks and weeks just like, just fine tuning, finessing that thing so it's perfect. It's an amazing movie, right? So and I'm sure that Zimmer spent way more than 6 weeks on that score. Like he probably spent months and months because like such an important movie, so much is on the line. There's so much money involved. You might spend 4, 5, 6 months on a movie like that. I mean,
Sure.
you might get involved way early too. I mean, it's just but so it ranges all the way from spending 6 months on a movie, a year on a movie, who knows, on the biggest movies, to spending 2 weeks or 4 days on an episode of television, right? 4 days to deliver an hour-long episode of television. I mean, like that's the crazy extremes of the life of a composer.
Well, this film is definitely one that is rewatchable. Dope monster, good story. Um, and in the end, the thing that complements it very, very well is, again, your score, man. So,
Oh, thank you.
congratulations. Um, where can everybody kind of keep track of what you've got going on, what you got coming out? You mentioned that thriller. Where can everybody keep tabs?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess first of all, the score comes out tomorrow. I think I mentioned that earlier, on streaming everywhere. So iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, wherever else you listen to your music, Amazon. Um, we're gonna get, so that it's obviously everyone's streaming now. So check that out tomorrow, Friday the 15th. And then as far as like following me, I've got the social medias, right? Instagram, it's Christain Davis Composer. Twitter, it's like C Davis Compose, like CMPSR, like a shortened version because at the time you couldn't have a long handle. I don't know, maybe you can have longer handles now.
Yeah.
And then obviously my website, ChristianDavisMusic.com. You can check me out there and probably find links. You'll find links to my social media there. So check me out on my website, on social media, and on the streaming music services.
Cool, man. Awesome. Well, Christian, we'll definitely have you back on here at some point and touch base and see what you've got cooking up. We also, I mean, we got nerd shows and other shows too. So maybe at some point you're on the other show talking about another childhood heartstring that you're pulling on with your with your musical strings. The But anyway, man, thank you very much for taking the time out. We appreciate it, and we will get you back on here down the line.
Thanks, man. It was a pleasure. I loved it. Great talking music, talking film.